Story 1. When I was a young kid, I got a job babysitting for my neighbors. They had two little girls who were just the easiest kids to look after. The mom and dad were super nice people. Dad was a nurse who worked mainly nights, and mom worked from home and would ask me over Friday nights so she could go out and have some downtime. I quickly found out, though, that she was seeing other men. The first night I went over there, the mom informed me she would be home no later than midnight. Well, 4 a.m. rolled around, and I was woken up by noise out in the porch and saw her hastily kiss another man and shooing him off. She apologizes for being late, pays me, was $5 short, and I go home to my mom, who's pissed that she kept me so late. The same thing happened 2 more times. She'd promised to be home at midnight and come home at 3 or 4 in the morning, every time with a different guy, and every time would stiffen me with little of what I earned. My mom put a stop to it and called her out for cheating on her husband. They ended up getting divorced not long after that. Instead of shortchanging the sitter, maybe she should have sweetened the deal with extra cash to keep things hush-hush. But hey, the sitter should still spill the beans, right? Story 2. I used to babysit for a pair of girls, and the 6-year-old was always trying to show me what she could stick inside her down there. I was pretty weirded out by that. She would even try and show me in the street corner. She had no shame about it. I also got fired from that job for washing the floor. I used to do busy work when the kids were sleeping. The mom was convinced I washed the floor because something terrible happened and I had to clean it up. Okay. She even had her niece, who was in my grade at school, grill me to get me to admit what I had spilled on the floor. She was a school counselor. She always used to mow the lawn in really inappropriate bikinis and had some live-in French boy toy. The kid's real daddy lived in Jamaica somewhere. They never saw him. I can't say they were especially weird in any other respect, but the babysitter they hired after me was 4 years younger than me and probably got paid less than me. She claimed the floor was sticky after I washed it. I didn't notice any stickiness when I was done, and her kids were awake when I washed it. So I don't know why she just didn't ask them if anything was spilled. They would have seen it. I have a suspicion that she just wanted to pay the other girl less than me. My sister and the new sitter were friends, and she admitted the mom paid her way less than me. I have no idea why she needed her niece to grill me on it. I guess she was an overly suspicious type of lady. Story 3. I wasn't really babysitting, as the girl was older and was mature enough to take care of herself just fine while her mother was at work. I was paid to keep her safe. Her father got into illegal substances and women, which turned him quite violent and scary. Their mother kicked him out, and he vanished for a while. I knew all of this because I was close to the family. A few months go by and he starts showing up, banging on the doors. She was inside, scared to death, hiding. He leaves and she runs to my place, bawling her eyes out and begging me to protect her. I let her in and closed the blinds. She knew I would keep her safe. I was a brick house back then. I told her to keep the doors closed and not leave the house, as I needed to walk to her mother's work to let her know what was going on. Small town, it wasn't a far walk. And that I would keep her at my place until she was off work. After that day, I was hired. I was paid in freshly baked cookies and a can of pop to hang out with her daughter while she was at work. She was a good kid. We had always gotten along, so it was no biggie. Today, I took her to see Beavis and Butthead do America in the theater. Her dad went to prison, I believe, and we stopped hanging out. Several years later, we bumped into each other in a big city on a bus. She was so happy to see me, and thanked me again for being her big protective sister all those years ago. It was the last time we saw each other. I think about her often, and wish I knew where she was and if she was okay. Story 4. I spent a summer babysitting the 2 most spoiled little brats it's ever been my displeasure to come across. Their names were Mary and Kristen. Their mom was an awesome lady, but she tried to overcompensate for an absent father, who was apparently quite the cruel a-hole to her. Luckily, the kids had no memory of this. She was smart enough to nope out of that marriage before he could do any harm to the girls. Anyway, things were fine for the first week or so. Then one evening I told the eldest, Kristen, that she wasn't to have more than 3 cookies before dinner that I'd already given her. And I really wasn't supposed to have given her those. Her response? She took off all her clothing and ran into the wall over and over, hard enough to leave dents. As I watched her do this, in absolute horror, I noticed similar dents all over the walls. Within 5 minutes, her little sister Mary had begun to do this too. Well, I let them do it. I wasn't having it. Even at my age then, I had no tolerance for that crap. So I sat down and read a book while they proceeded to destroy Mom's security deposit. She'd do this till she passed out. Her kid sister too. At least they were always in bed by the time Mom got home. They were also horrific tattletales. Eventually, I started punishing them for whatever their friends did that they ratted them out for. I did this mainly to keep them from being tormented in the playground. Kid code dictates that you don't tattletale, and I didn't have time for that crap. Mary. Emily stole my chocolate and ate it. All right, Mary, well then, no snack for you. I'm pleased to say that they were much less spoiled rotten by the time I moved on and quit watching them and have turned into proper, healthy, lovely women. But my God, I will always see those 2 little brats as the bare, squawking little devils I once knew them as. I envy those kids. Those little daredevils have a bright future in the demolition business, mapped out from an early age. Watch out, world. Story 5. That reminds me of a family I used to babysit. There were 3 kids. The oldest was the girl, and then there were 2 younger, autistic boys. While the mother treated them all equally, the father didn't. He obviously played favorites for the girl and was always yelling at the 2 autistic boys. It's really just tragic all around. It was especially hard to witness because the father had no idea he was doing it. It was obviously because the father had a hard time coping with the boy's autism. It seemed like he knew it was wrong but couldn't get past his issues. I have no doubt he loved the boys. When I was babysitting them, I was helping the middle child, Ben, get ready for bed. In the middle of brushing his teeth, he goes, "Rockstar State, do you think I'm bad?" What? No, I think you're wonderful, Ben. I think I'm bad. That's silly. You aren't bad. I love playing with you. Do you love me? I love you. Oh, of course I love you, Ben. It kind of broke my heart because he's usually so lively, but he got really sad and serious when he said it. Needless to say, he got an extra bedtime story that night. They were the absolute best kids I've ever babysat. So extremely well-tempered too and absolutely adorable. Story 6. I babysat for a very prominent family in my town. Wife was a CEO, husband was a lawyer. It was the best job ever. 2 easygoing kids, $15 an hour. This was 15 years ago, so that was a ton of money. Access to their pool and an open invitation for my friends to come swim while I was working. In between my first and second summers working for them, the parents divorced, and the dad bought a giant house out in the country where he'd watch the kids sometimes. He made it very clear that his office and all the outbuildings were strictly off limits. Okay, whatever. No problem. He had a groundskeeper who was always prowling around, hitting on me and acting like a total creeper. If the kids or I came within 20 feet of the supposedly empty stables, he'd shoo us away, saying he'd spotted a dangerous snake, just sprayed for bugs or some other BS reason to keep us away. I came home from school a few months after my summer gig was over and saw the dad's mugshot on TV. He'd been busted as some kind of small-time kingpin, selling snow to dealers out of his house in the country, and his groundskeeper was a wanted man. It was a huge, embarrassing ordeal for his ex-wife and their kids, and they eventually moved away. My parents freaked out that I was working so close to criminal activity and wouldn't let me babysit anymore after that. It was a bummer all around. Story 7. When I was a teenager, I was babysitting for a family whose dog had just been hit by a car and had a broken leg. There was one kid, a little girl. I'd been asked to take the dog out to pee a few times that night. It had to be leash-walked. So while the little girl was happily watching TV in her parents' bed, I took the dog out to the front yard. The people neglected to tell me that the front door locked on its own when it's closed. I've never ever seen a door in a house do that. So when I turned to go back in, I was locked out with the little girl alone in the house. I went across the street to the neighbor. I think they mentioned that their neighbor had a spare key if ever needed one. No answer. I go over to the window where I can see the kid and try to instruct her to open the door. She goes to the front door and from the window along the side of the door and pointing and saying, "Open the door! Go on, open the door!" And she's not getting it. She breaks down, crying hysterically because she doesn't know why I'm not coming back in, then runs back to her parents' bed to continue sobbing. I felt horrible. The next door neighbor notices what's going on and asks what's up. It was kind of a shady guy. It was the last guy in the neighborhood not to sell his property for flipping. It was a well-off neighborhood and he had the last tiny brick bungalow among giant rebuilds. He had a lovely, unmowed lawn growing around an old rusty car up on blocks. Nice guy, though. He said, "Oh, I can break in for you. Let me get my tools." So he proceeds to go up on the roof and completely remove their skylight, one of those plexi bubble type ones, and drop himself down into the house. Luckily, the little girl had fallen asleep on her parents' bed by that point. When the parents came home, they felt awful for not telling me about the door, and I had to tell them they should get their skylight checked for leaks. The neighbor across the street later told me she does have their spare key and was home that night and heard me ringing the doorbell, but she had just had a bath and was in her bathrobe and didn't feel like answering. She felt pretty bad about that. That's pretty wild. I mean, MacGyver would be proud of the roof drop maneuver, right? Mission Impossible vibes all the way. And hey, if you're a fan of Daredevil stories and wild adventures, smash that like button and subscribe to my channel. I've got a treasure trove of them waiting for you. Story 8. I haven't babysat in a while, but when I was a teenager, I watched 2 kids up the street. The mother was single and had another single friend with 2 kids, so I usually watched them all. I knew they went out to party, which was fine because they'd come home buzzed and pay me more than I expected. What I didn't know was how much they partied. One evening, I went upstairs to get money for pizza, found both moms in the bathroom snow. The worst thing was when they offered me some, despite the fact that A, I was about to spend the night watching their young children, and B, I was still young at the time. Story 9. I babysat a little boy who had severe emotional problems. One time he ran away while I was upstairs playing with his sister. He ran away to the park down the block, climbed a tree and refused to come down because no one loved him. I was young and didn't think about calling the police or anything. I just sat at the bottom of the tree and literally talked him down. I convinced him that I loved him and wanted him to calm down. His siblings also helped me by saying they loved him. It was so scary. Story 10. I usually take care of 3 siblings. The younger ones, a girl and a boy who are twins, usually ask me the strangest questions. One day the boy turned to me and asked me if I shaved my legs. I said that, yes, I do. Then the girl asked me if I shaved my hair down there. I was so surprised by the question that, before answering, the little boy just told me that their mom doesn't do it. But, he continues, she has her legs shaved because my dad does it for her when they take showers together. Not too strange, but at the end of the night it was a bit weird looking at their parents' faces when they arrived. Kids and censored honesty, it's like a box of fireworks. You never know when they're going to drop those unexpected bombs on you. Story 11. I babysat regularly as a teen. One night it was business as usual. I just laid the kids down for bed until I heard crying in the bathroom. I went in and the little one had a poop string hanging out of his bottom. I didn't want to pull it in case it was wrapped around something, so I'm trying to keep this kid calm and call his parents. They didn't answer. I call over and over with this kid freaking out. I called my mom, who calmed me down, took their number, and then chain called them until she got a hold of them. They rushed home and took him to the ER. It was definitely my weirdest night. The string came out fine, by the way. Apparently, the kid liked yarn. A lot. Story 12. I used to babysit my neighbor's kids. Actually, I babysat them for one night. That was all. There were 3 of them, and the mother never really learned how to discipline either, as all 3 were literally the red-headed demon children you always hear about. I don't remember their names now. The middle child was on some sort of medication for an anger problem. The youngest looked up to the middle child and copied him, and the eldest, the sister, was more mild-mannered but tolerable alone. It started off normal. The 2 younger kids were riding their bikes around the neighborhood, and the eldest and I were doing a puzzle. Eventually, the kids got bored, so we broke out their game of Connect 4. That went well for all of maybe 5 minutes. The middle child lost his game to the eldest, so he threw the entire game set at her, and she continued to tease him, which made him angrier. He continued to throw things around, and I asked him to stop. That's not nice. He yelled, "Shut up!" and tried to attack his sister. So she runs away screaming, with him following behind. The youngest decided to try and get involved, but somehow he trips and connects with the middle child's foot as he's running. So now I've got 2 kids roughing each other up and one with a bloody nose. I decided to leave the 2 elder kids while I dealt with a bloody nose here. I'm holding a crying, screaming child over a sink with hot water running while I'm trying to stay calm and have the other kids calm themselves. I did end up screaming stop to the kids, and they stopped. Back to the youngest, who's still crying. I realize, holy crap, this sink isn't draining. The middle kids go, "Oh yeah, that sink doesn't work." Okay, awesome. I've got to clean off the carpet, tile, and now a sink full of water. Of course, this is when the middle child decides to lose it and grabs something sharp from his mother's end table and tries to use it on his sister. What on earth? I take it from him, so of course he comes back from the kitchen with something else. Yay. Well, at least he stopped trying to hurt his sister for the time being, and he resorted to attacking all of his mother's furniture instead. But then I've called the mom like 4 times, but she isn't answering her phone, so I end up calling my stepmom, who's a retired military, because someone's going to get hurt, and I'm starting to lose my temper. So my stepmom runs over to see exactly that. I explain to her the situation, and she ends up restraining the middle child while I clean up the mess. Finally, mom calls back, and I explain the situation to her as well, and she says calmly, "Yeah, his medication must have worn off. Just tell him he's done nothing wrong and to give him what we want." Okay, maybe that isn't the exact words, but that's basically what she told me to do. Screw that. I got out of there, got paid $80, and that was my very last time babysitting. Story 18. When I was a kid, I babysat for a weird family in my town. They had 3 daughters who were super awesome, and we always had a blast. When I started, the youngest was just barely born. It turned into me babysitting for them more than their parents were home or I was at my own home. Anyway, the parents are into weird stuff. One of the things they liked to do was, for any major decisions they needed to make, they would get out a sinker attached to a string and ask it questions. If it swung a certain way, it meant yes, and if it went the other way, it meant no. Well, anyway, I've been watching these girls for a couple of years, and one night, the mother asks where the father and I go when he takes me home. I tell her that he takes me home right away, while she says that it takes him 2 or 3 hours before he gets back. Obviously, I'm stunned at what she's insinuating, but they pay okay, and I always know they were crazy anyway. About a week after this, she tells me that I can no longer watch the kids because her sinker told her that the husband and I were having an affair. We weren't. I was young, and he was an ugly 37-year-old. Oh, the magic conch from SpongeBob. All hail the magic conch. Story 14. I was young and babysitting 2 kids across the street for the night. My parents were home and even brought dinner, so I felt pretty safe. The mother of the 2 children goes to leave and says she'll be home in the early morning. Feel free to sleep in her bed. I ask about her husband. She said he's home soon before her, but go ahead and sleep in their bed. I got that weird gut feeling something was off, and after putting the kids to bed, I curled up on the couch and tried to sleep. The parents came home sometime between 3 and 4, and I could hear them in the kitchen commenting on how I was on the couch and not asleep in their bed as they had hoped. Should they wake me? Carry me upstairs? No, just leave her. I never said anything to my parents, and I avoided watching their kids for the next few years. The second and last time I babysat for them was 3 years later, which ended in me calling the parents home and leaving the house as their son had a fishing knife and a whip, gifts from Grandpa, he was threatening me with. Story 15. I babysat 2 little boys every day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for this summer. They had a single mom who was super cool and let me take the boys to the beach, pool, boardwalk, whatever. One day when I got to work, she informed me that her new boyfriend, who I never met or heard her talk about, was going to stay home all day because he was sick. I wasn't sure why I had to be there too, but I wanted to pay and figured maybe he was too sick to watch the boys. About lunchtime, I fed the boys and we walked to the community pool. We were there for a while and come back with the boyfriend watching TV in the living room. This being the first time meeting the boyfriend, I introduced myself and sent the boys upstairs to shower and change. As soon as the boys left the room, the boyfriend asked me to take my cover up and bathing suit off. Being young and naive, I laughed and said something stupid like, "What?" Well, he became more persistent at that point. I grabbed my stuff and told him I was leaving, calling the police and the boys' mother. Looking back, I probably should have taken the boys, but I was freaked out and not thinking. I left and never looked back. The police came and talked to me, but when they got to the house, the mom was there and he had left. The mom never believed me and didn't pay me for the week. She accused me several times of making it up to get out of work. Why she would believe that dirtbag she just met over her babysitter of several months is beyond me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy what happens when you don't take kids seriously. Story 4 will make you question the parenting skills of some people. See you in that video.